Hi kids! Welcome to our lesson for today. So last time, remember, we talked about Jonathan, who is King Saul's son, and we talked about how he was brave and courageous. And because of this, the Israelites were able to defeat the Philistines and they won a great victory that day.
Yes.
Now, Saul became and grew into a more powerful king and a more powerful soldier, and he ruled over all of Israel. He is the one who gave all of the commands.
Yes.
But it was still Samuel's job
yeah.
to remind Saul about God's commands, because the king of Israel is supposed to follow God's commands.
God's commands.
But Saul started wanting to do his own thing.
His own thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So one day, Saul was preparing his army to go into battle. But then Samuel had told him that to wait for him and that they were going to come
in a week's
time.
Yes. So in a week's time, Samuel was to arrive. But Saul started seeing his troops scattering.
And
so
he grew impatient and he
grew
was
impatient
scared.
and he was scared
Yes.
because his troops were scattering. So he said, bring to me the burnt offerings and the peace offerings so that I will sacrifice them.
And he offered the sacrifice to God. But remember, that was the job, that was the work of Samuel the prophet and not Saul the king.
Yes.
So Saul was not supposed to offer sacrifices, but Samuel was supposed to do that instead.
Yes.
But now Saul had offered the sacrifice and he was not supposed to.
Yes. So as soon as Saul finished offering the sacrifices, Samuel arrived. And then when they met, Samuel told him, What have you done? And Saul gave the excuse that the men were scattering. So I had to offer the sacrifice. And Samuel told him that was a very foolish thing to do. Yes, you should not have disobeyed the Lord's commands.
Yeah. But then again, on a different occasion, Saul disobeyed God again.
Imagine, after Samuel had told him that it was foolish to disobey God, he did it again.
So this time round, God had ordered them to destroy everything that belongs to the Amalekites.
Yes.
So God had told Saul and his army to kill everyone, all the men, the women, the children, the babies, the cattle, the sheep,
the goats, the donkeys, the camels, everything. They were supposed to kill and destroy everything.
But instead,
Saul spared the life of King Agag. And he also kept the nice cattle, the sheep, the goats, the fattened cows and the lambs, and he kept anything that was pleasing
to their
to
eyes.
them.
They decided to keep it. But remember, God had said destroy everything. And when Saul was asked why he had kept some things, he said that
He gave the excuse
that they were going to offer the cattle and the sheep,
as
that they were
sacrifice.
as sacrifice to God. But remember, God had said
Destroy
everything.
yes.
But instead they kept what was pleasing to their eyes and they destroyed only what was worthless.
Yes, and Saul disobeyed God again. Now, Samuel knew it was so important to God that his people have a king who obeys his commands.
Yes.
Because remember, God is the king of
the
Israel.
Israelites, yes.
The earthly king was just there to represent. Yes, he was just a representative, but he was to obey God's commands.
Yes,
and be an example.
Be a good example to the people. And so Saul had failed in that because he had disobeyed God yet again.
In favor of doing his own things, just like every other king in the nation.
And God told Samuel that he was very sorry that he had made Saul king.
Yes,
God said, very sad.
It's very sad.
Yes.
God said he is sorry he ever made Saul king, and that was very sad. So Samuel said to Saul, don't you know that obedience is better than sacrifice. Yes.
And so Samuel told Saul, obedience is better than sacrifice, and God is more happy when you obey rather than when you offer sacrifices.
Yes, obeying makes God more happy. And then Samuel also told Saul, don't you know that disobedience is a sin, and that it is a sin as bad as doing evil magic
or witchcraft?
Practicing witchcraft, that disobedience is as bad as those. And he also said that, don't you know, if you think you know better than God, then that is a sin equal to worshipping idols. Yes.
So Samuel told Saul all these things, and he also told Saul that because you have refused to obey the commands of God, God has also refused and rejected you as king.
Yes.
And he told Saul that none of your sons is going to be king in Israel, and that God was going to get someone else who was willing to obey him
and to follow his
commands to be king instead.
Yes.
And so sadly, that is how that is how Saul's disobedience took away the kingship out of his family, because he disobeyed. So children, we really need to put this in our heads and in our minds and in our hearts, that we have to obey.
Always obey. We have to always obey God. No matter what, we have to remember to always obey.
Because obedience is better than sacrifice.
Yes, and not to give excuses or for anything. Because remember, Saul gave all of these excuses for his disobedience. No, we need to remember that we need to always obey.
Yes. So now we are going to stand up and sing our song that's going to remind us to always be obedient. So let's all stand up and sing our song.
Okay, kids, we just talked about how King Saul disobeyed God's commands over and over again and decided to do his own thing. And because of this, God rejected him as king of Israel. And Samuel told Saul that his sons will never rule over Israel, and that God is going to choose a new king, one that will follow his orders and obey him. So we are going to sing about how we are going to obey God right away. So everyone stand up and help us sing this song. Okay, kids, so we've just talked about how King Saul disobeyed God over and over again. Yes, over and over again. And how in the end, his disobedience cost him everything. Because Samuel told him, you will no longer be king. God does not recognize you as king of Israel anymore. Your sons will never be king, and God will choose someone else. So now we need to remember to always obey God. And this is our craft that's going to help us do that. We are going to make a key holder. And we're going to make keys for our key holder. So what we did is we took different manila paper and we cut them up. So the first one is the green one, and we cut it up into a square, and this is going to be the holder for our key. Then we have 3 keys. So we drew keys and we cut them out on manila paper. So our keys are going to have what happens when you disobey, and then our key holder is going to say, I will obey. So that is the first thing we're going to write. So take your key holder and write, I will obey, and write them as big as you can and make them as bold as you can, because you need to remember to obey always. So big and bold, and write, I will obey. And why will we obey? So now we will take our keys, and on our keys, on the first key, you need to write, obedience is better than sacrifice. Because remember, Samuel told Saul after he had disobeyed God, obedience is better than sacrifice. So obedience is better than sacrifice. Obedience is better than sacrifice. That is the first reason why we will obey. So we will obey because 1, obedience is better than sacrifice. Then next we need to write, disobedience is a sin. Because remember, Samuel told Saul, when you disobey God, it is a sin equal to worshipping idols or
practicing witchcraft.
Yes. So we need to write, disobedience is a sin. So that is another reason why we have to obey, because disobedience is a sin. And then finally, on our last key, we need to write, disobedience will cost you everything. Because that's what happened to King Saul. He disobeyed, and then God said he is no longer a king. So disobedience will cost you everything. So now we have our 3 keys and we have why we will obey. So now we need to attach our keys to our key holder. So take your ribbon and put it through the key holder and then through each of the keys. So we made a hole at the top of our keys with a paper punch. So now we're going to put it through each of our keys. So remember, we'll start with the last key. The last key is that disobedience will cost you everything. Then the next one is disobedience is a sin. And the first key is obedience is better than sacrifice. So once you've strung all of them through, just tie a knot at the top of your ribbon.
So your ribbon is actually your key ring?
Yes, your ribbon is your key ring. So tie a knot at the top of your ribbon. And because my ribbon is still long, I'm going to cut the end. So there we go. Now we have our key holder that says, I will obey. And we have the reasons why we are going to obey. Obedience is better than sacrifice. Disobedience is a sin, and disobedience will cost you everything. So there we have our key holder now. There we have our key holder, and this is going to remind us that we always need to obey God. We need to obey God's commands, and we need to obey our parents, and we need to obey all the time. Yes.
So that's our lesson today. Until next time, bye.